My name is Amina. I was a devoted Muslim woman, deeply entrenched in the teachings of my faith. In the sacred city of Medina, I wore my dedication like a veil, layered with modesty, steeped in tradition, and upheld by the admiration of those around me. As a teacher of Islamic studies for young girls, I breathed life into the verses of the Quran, guiding my students through the beauty and discipline of our faith. But underneath this facade of devotion, a haunting void echoed, a yearning for what connection that my rigorous observance failed to fulfill. Then, everything changed one sweltering afternoon. As I walked home, a chilling darkness swiftly engulfed me, pulling me into a chasm where light dared not tread. In that ethereal abyss, I experienced something unimaginable, a near-death experience that stripped away my very identity. And there, in that unsettling stillness, I came face to face with someone I had only known through whispers, the radiant presence of Jesus. He didn't come to confront my beliefs. He came to unveil a reality far removed from what I had been taught. Through his compassionate gaze, I glimpsed the intricate web of manipulation spun by powerful forces, an elite few leveraging faith for their gain, igniting wars, and perpetuating division. In that moment, I learned I was caught in a spiritual war that transcended the boundaries of religion. Here lay the truth of our fractured reality, and with it, a clarion call to awaken. As the visions poured forth, the weight of urgency pressed upon me, a revelation that shattered my understanding of the world. What I once held sacred now felt like a cage, nurtured by shadows of deception. The stakes became clear. We are all entangled in this struggle, where truth and love are constantly at war with fear and control. I could no longer linger in silence. I had to rise and illuminate the darkness that suffocated so many. So here I stand, ready to share this journey of awakening. What you're about to hear is not just my story, but a beacon for those yearning for the light in this tumultuous age. Before we dive deeper, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now where you are? Your voice matters in this unfolding truth. And if you're eager to discover the profound revelations that await, make sure to subscribe to Truth from Beyond. This is just the beginning of a transformative journey, a path that leads us all back to the essence of love and reality we were meant to embrace. I was raised in Medina, a city draped in the strictest fabric of Islamic law. Every corner echoes with the calls to prayer, a rhythm stitching together a life that, on the surface, seems purely devoted to God. As a teacher of Islamic studies for girls, I wore my devotion like armor. Modesty clad my body. Discipline refined my spirit, and the admiration of my community fueled my confidence. I taught my students about the beauty of our religion, the importance of obedience, and the virtues that our faith extolled. Yet beneath the layers of my resolute exterior, I felt a growing void, a quiet, insistent ache for something deeper, for a connection with God that my strict observance failed to ignite. It was during one of those long, sweltering days when everything changed. I was walking home from school, the air heavy with the scent of sandalwood and dust. Suddenly, everything shifted. One moment, I was present, and the next, I was consumed by a darkness that felt alive. It enveloped me, pulling me into an abyss where light did not exist. In those haunting moments, I experienced what I can only describe as a near-death experience. I was not merely lost. I was stripped of identity, of my long-held beliefs and my understanding of reality. It was then that I encountered him, Jesus, radiant and filled with an otherworldly peace. He looked at me with those infinite eyes, and I understood that the truths I had been taught were tangled in layers of deception. He spoke. Not with words, but with pure understanding, revealing to me the hidden agenda of those I had trusted. The elite, I learned, manipulate faith for control, directing followers away from authentic connection with God. You've been caught in a spiritual war, he conveyed to me, a war against the very essence of love and truth. As he unfolded the complexities of the human experience, I glimpsed the current state of our world. Wars fueled by greed, a division that severs humanity and leaders driven by power rather than compassion. With every revelation came a sense of urgency, a call to awaken from the slumber of blind obedience into the light of spiritual discernment. My heart raced as I absorbed the depth of these truths. Armies clash not only in physical territories but within the hearts of men, and I realized my silence had been a complicity in this deception. I felt a profound agitation, the kind that compels one to rise and speak against the machine. As I listened, flashes of the future unfurled before me, gnawing societal divides manipulated by technology, families torn apart by rhetoric, truth choked by layers of lies. I saw shadows masquerading as leaders, cloaked in false righteousness while wielding control over the minds of the innocent. My existence had been an echo within this struggle, yet here I was, handed a lifeline, a glimpse at profound awakening. As the vision faded, the stark reality of my life slammed back into focus, and I gasped for breath back in my body, staring up at the sky. Everything felt transformed. The mundane streets of Medina, now a battleground for spiritual warfare. What was once my home now seemed an insidious prison, and I understood that my retreat into strict observance had been my barrier against the truth. I had gained the world's approval, yet forfeited my connection to divinity. The deception I had lived began to unravel before me, thread by thread, as I grasped the enormity of my revelations. Struggling to reclaim my sense of normalcy, each decision became a question of faith. With the overwhelming knowledge of this spiritual war flooding my heart and mind, I stood on a precipice, caught between the comfort of familiar beliefs and the uncharted territory of awakening. The choice to embrace this new understanding beckoned like a siren, whispering promises of freedom and the weight of uncertainty. And in that moment, I knew I could no longer remain in the shadows. I was called to confront the illusions I once cherished, to challenge the very fabric of the reality around me. The journey toward the truth had just begun, and I was ready to embrace the unknown. I've lived what many would call an ordinary life, but beneath the surface, there was a constant struggle for meaning. As a dedicated school teacher, I spent most of my days nurturing the minds of my students, guiding them through the complexities of language and literature. I cherished those moments, watching them light up with understanding, their potential unfolding before my eyes. Yet, outside the classroom, my existence felt like a roller coaster of emotions, drifting from the joy of teaching to burdens of gravity that I often masked with forced smiles. My loyalty was unwavering, rooted in my belief in education as a means to transform lives. Yet there was an echo of despair lurking in the shadows of my mind, whispering doubts about the world I knew. One fateful afternoon, all of that changed. As I left the school, my mind buzzed with the day's lessons, shifting rapidly between my students' bright faces and the relentless responsibilities awaiting me at home. Suddenly, an unexpected intersection appeared, the world around me grinding to a halt as a reckless driver sped towards my side of the road. Time seemed to contort as I braced for the impact. The sound of metal on metal echoed through my being before everything vanished into a surreal quiet. In that moment of suspension, I felt an indescribable force lift me from my shattered reality, pulling me toward an ethereal light that shimmered with warmth. There, amid radiant brilliance, I encountered Jesus. His presence was both familiar and transformative, wrapping my spirit in an embrace filled with love. As I stood before him, I was plunged into a rush of urgency and revelation. I was shown flashes of our world's current state, images of escalating chaos, brutal wars uniting a divide that would tear societies apart, leaders shaping the masses through deception rather than truth, and an unseen elite pulling the strings, thriving on the suffering of humanity. Each revelation crashed into me like waves, sweeping away any comfort in the beliefs I had clung to. I watched as fear poisoned relationships, sown as a seed that flourished in the shadows of our existence. Jesus' voice resonated deeply within me, urging me to awaken and to recognize the ongoing spiritual war, a battle fought not just within my own heart, but in the very essence of our collective humanity. These glimpses were not without their weight. I felt the tension of time bearing down on me, igniting an urgency that begged for action. I realized that the truths hidden beneath layers of manipulation were not mere academic discussions, but the keys to releasing the chains that bound so many. I understood the critical importance of sharing this awakening, of bringing light to those linger in darkness, trapped by ignorance and fear. With each vision, the reality of a growing divide became stark. The technology we relied on, once seen as a means to empower, was serving a far more sinister agenda, robbing us of our ability to connect and perceive the truth. Society had become anesthetized, lulled into a false sense of security that vibrated in stark contrast to the turmoil building beneath. Yet, even within this profound understanding, I felt a wave of reluctance and fear. How could I, one voice against the storm, challenge the beliefs of my community? The people around me had accepted these narratives as truth, comforted by the predictable rhythms of life that followed old traditions. I saw the lifelessness in their eyes, the way they blindly accepted the status quo. They were the same students whose eager questions I had once joyfully answered. Now hardened by dogma, their spirits dimmed. The disconnect I felt was even more painful, a chasm that widened with every revelation I encountered. Jesus' presence offered solace, yet it left me with an almost paralyzing responsibility to be the harbinger of this awakening, even when faced with potential isolation and hostility. All around me, the battle raged, fear relentlessly battling love, deception aiming to silence truth. With each day that passed, I grappled with the urgency of this mission. Would my voice matter? Could it break through the walls of ignorance? Or would I be trapped in a world where the truth remained buried by the layers of conformity? A storm brewed in. My heart, filled with deep-seated emotion and an insatiable need to bring this awakening to light. I felt like a warrior preparing for a fight, equipped with the knowledge that could spark change, yet terrified of the consequences that would follow. As darkness clung to our existence, the glimmers of revelation urged me on, demanding I pay heed to what was unfolding around us. What awaited me on the other side of this awakening? Would I have the strength to confront the hurdles set before me? As I ventured deeper into understanding, the stakes became ever clearer, shifting the very ground beneath my feet. I lived a simple life as a truck driver, a father providing for my family with long hours on the road. Day after day, the hum of the engine felt like an unchanging rhythm, a backdrop to my thoughts as I traversed the endless highways. I wasn't one for deep reflection, just survival, however mundane it seemed. But one stormy night, as I drove through a heavy downpour, everything changed. Suddenly, the world outside turned chaotic. An unexpected slick patch on the asphalt sent my truck skidding, flipping over. In the darkness, time stretched infinitely as I wrestled with an overwhelming sense of fear. My life flashed before my eyes, a montage of moments both trivial and profound. I felt my spirit separate from my body, floating above the wreckage, cold and bewildered. In that otherworldly state, I was enveloped in darkness, hovering between the familiar and the unknown. Suddenly, a light appeared, soft, inviting, yet radiant beyond comprehension. In its embrace stood Jesus, his eyes filled with love and infinite wisdom. He beckoned me closer, and my heart surged with emotion. I had been afraid, haunted by doubts and questions I never dared to voice. Yet as I stood before him, all that vanished. He spoke softly, his voice echoing like a symphony, revealing truths that had remained hidden beneath layers of deceit spun by the world. You are not just a driver, you are part of a greater tapestry, he said. In that moment, the walls I had built around my heart crumbled, replaced by an overwhelming sense of purpose. He showed me the spiritual war raging all around us, obscured by the illusions of our everyday lives. Your world is fragmented, he revealed, not just by borders, but by fear and greed, manipulated by the elite who thrive on division. I saw images flash before me, conflicts instigated by leaders wielding power for their own agenda, using technology and propaganda to keep the masses in chains, both literal and metaphorical. It was a revelation, one that sent shivers down my spine. How many remained oblivious, enslaved by the very systems they trusted? My mind churned as I processed it all. The depths of deception were unfathomable, reaching into the very core of existence, where love struggled to break free from the iron grip of fear. As the visions continued to unfold, I witnessed broken families, societies torn apart by strife, and individuals craving connection yet suffocated by the weight of their burdens. I saw the toll this division took, not just on humanity, but on the very fabric of creation. Jesus gestured toward a distant horizon where hope lingered, a place of awakening and healing. The truth is love, he emphasized. It is the one thing that can unite across beliefs and fill the void left by fear. Many must awaken to pursue this path. The urgency in his voice ignited my spirit. The gravity of these truths was not meant to be taken lightly. The implications were staggering and demanded action from all of us. With each heartbeat, my understanding deepened. This was more than a personal revelation. It was a call to arms for anyone willing to listen. I realized the interconnectedness of our struggles, the wars abroad, reflecting the battles fought within each soul. I saw how technology, while a tool for connection, could be twisted into instruments of control, perpetuating the cycle of deception. I found myself grappling with the weight of responsibility that lay ahead for humanity. This stark contrast between the urgent need for awakening and the machinery of division working tirelessly against us stirred something profound within me. But then, in that moment of clarity, just as quickly as the revelations came, they began to fade. I felt a pull back to my broken body, to the world of grief and fear that awaited. Jesus' presence lingered, his final words echoing in my consciousness. The path of truth is daunting, but it must be chosen. Your awakening is just the beginning. As the darkness of my near-death experience released its grip, I gasped for air, feeling the sharp sting of reality press against my chest. What awaited me now in the waking world? How would I confront the hidden agendas and fight against the manipulation I had witnessed? My heart raced, teetering on the precipice between fear and the exhilarating promise of transformation. I remember the moments like they were burned into the fabric of my mind. My life was ordinary. I was just an engineer, crunching numbers, solving problems, and going home to my peaceful little family. My days were filled with deadlines and equations, the hum of machines in the background blending into the drone of my routine. I had faith, sure, but it was a quiet kind, the kind that keeps itself bottled up and rarely leaves the confines of Sunday services. That all changed when I found myself facing a wall of concrete, a fatal moment on a job site that I never saw coming. One moment, I was adjusting safety harnesses. The next, all I felt was the suffocating weight of metal crashing down around me. In that instant, I experienced something that transcended my understanding of life and death. I saw my life flash before my eyes, but it wasn't just a review. I felt a deep ache for every missed opportunity, every moment of anger and pride, every ounce of regret that had built up over years. A darkness enveloped me, pulling me into the depths of despair while I wrestled against the weight of those moments. Just as I thought all was lost, a surge of light shattered through the void, brighter than the sun, warmer than any embrace. I was pulled through the darkness and into the light, and there he stood, illuminated beyond comprehension. "Jesus," I whispered, recognizing him instantly. The weight of my spirit fell away, replaced with a profound yearning for truth. He looked right into the core of my being, unearthing every fear and lie I'd been conditioned to accept. "The world is enmeshed in a spiritual war," he said, his voice echoing with a depth that transcended time. "What you see is but a fraction of the reality. The deception is real, my child. The elite deceive you all while fueling division in every facet of society. They thrive on your ignorance." Each word resonated within me, igniting desires I didn't realize existed. Suddenly, I was not just an engineer, but a witness to something monumental, something far greater. Visions flooded my consciousness. Images of conflict staining the soil, the sound of sorrow mingling with gunfire. I saw brothers turning against brothers, families torn apart by ideologies born from fear rather than love. I felt the urgency of the moment, the betrayal of leaders who created circling sharks of political agendas, feeding on the vulnerability of the masses. The technology that was meant to connect often served only to divide, feeding an algorithmic beast that thrived on chaos. It was a revelation. The world was a chessboard for unseen powers, and we, the pawns, lost in our daily struggles, oblivious to the grand scope of the game. As the images expanded, I experienced the heartache of every innocent victim caught in the crossfire of power struggles. I saw how fear manipulated reality, how entire narratives were crafted to keep us in perpetual bondage, shackled by misinformation. Each revelation hit harder than the last, igniting a fierce determination within me. "Do you understand now?" Jesus asked, and his eyes, filled with compassion and urgency, convicted me deeply. "You are called to awaken, to share the truth of what you've seen. The time is now." The weight of that calling felt like a heavy mantle resting on my shoulders, a responsibility I couldn't ignore. The final vision was of a gathering storm, an elevation of tension unlike anything I have ever witnessed. As this spiritual awakening unfolded before me, I realized it wasn't an isolated journey. It was an invitation for all of humanity. The fractured state of our world became a clarion call to action, an urgent plea for each of us to awaken to our potential, to reclaim our agency in the face of manipulation. Remember, truth is eternal, but the enemy of truth is relentless. I stood on the precipice of deeper understanding, thirsting for a sense of purpose within the swirling chaos surrounding me. With every heartbeat, I felt the urgency pulse through the collective. Consciousness, a reminder that the war was far from over and my spirit would no longer rest in silence. Suddenly, I was thrust back, gasping for air as darkness enveloped me once more. The crushing weight of reality slammed down upon me, the silence broken only by the chaos of the world rushing back into focus. I was still alive, still trapped in the vanishing moments of everyday life, yet I was irrevocably changed by that encounter. I understood that the road ahead would not be easy. The whispers of doubt and fear beckoned me to revert to my old self. The conscious battle between light and darkness raged within me, calling for clarity in a world drowned in obscurity. I could feel the tension of awakening, and with every breath, I knew that the revelations were just the beginning, a flicker of light in an overarching narrative desperate for truth. I had lived a life that felt predictable, molded by the hustle and bustle of everyday existence. I was a father, a husband, managing a small construction company where I poured every ounce of my spirit into building dreams for others while suppressing my own. My hands bore the calluses of labor, but in the back of my mind, I wasn't just constructing buildings. I was building a future, a legacy that I hoped would be cherished by my children. Everything revolved around the routine, the subtle smiles of my wife as I walked through the door, the laughter of my children as they rushed to greet me. Yet beneath that calm surface, I harbored doubts, fears about the direction of our society, of the world my children would inherit. A nagging unrest whispered incessantly, but I quelled it daily, convincing myself that I just needed to focus, to provide. That all changed in a moment that shattered everything I thought I knew. It was just another autumn afternoon when I was involved in a terrible accident. A heavy beam fell, and in an instant, darkness enveloped me. I wouldn't wake for what felt like an eternity, but in that void, I spiraled into realms I never knew existed. I witnessed specters of my life flashing before my eyes, moments of joy entwined with deep regrets, the faces of my family as they gleamed with pride, and the burdens of unmet expectations. But then, as I traversed through this chaos, I felt a pull, a warmth, a gentle light amidst the shadows. When the brightness enveloped me fully, I found myself standing before a figure that filled my heart with unimaginable peace. It was Jesus. He radiated love, a presence that wrapped around me like a warm embrace. He spoke without words, and yet every thought I had, every worry, was laid bare before him. In a visceral realization, I understood the fabric of deception that stitched our world together. I saw the elite, those who, driven by greed and power, orchestrated wars and divisions within society to keep the rest of us subdued. I was shown the hidden agenda, how technology, seen as a means of connection, was instead a tool of manipulation, designed to tear us apart while presenting the illusion of unity. The realization struck me hard as I understood the broad strokes of a spiritual war we are all engaged in, whether we recognize it or not. This revelation ignited a fire inside me, a call to arms, a plea for awakening, a divine urgency to shout the truth from the rooftops. As he continued to impart wisdom, I was flooded with images of present-day struggles, the harsh divisions among races, nations, and ideologies. I saw leaders leveraging these splits, fueling hatred and misunderstanding, all while maintaining a facade of authority. Each revelation felt like a lightning bolt, raw, disquieting, yet grounding. I understood that we are under siege, not just in the physical sense, but spiritually, and time is running out. Jesus' voice echoed in my spirit, signaling how to break the chains that bind so many of us to ignorance and despair. He revealed that a great awakening was coming, and I was meant to be a part of it. But the pathway would demand everything I had, pushing me to confront not just the exterior warfare, but the internal battleground where my own belief systems clashed. And then, the darkness began to stir again. I felt a pull, an unwillingness to leave this encounter behind. I was thrust back into my body, gasping for air on that cold hospital floor. The room was filled with chaos. Lives were being saved all around me, but mine had been irrevocably altered. I fought against the sense of urgency rising within me, a revelation not just for me, but for everyone trying to navigate this broken system. When I returned home, it became clear that my experience had painted a target on my back. Those who once called me friend now eyed me with suspicion, as if I had donned a mask of insanity. But something inside me would not lie down. The message from Jesus coursed through my veins, a relentless urging to awaken those still under the spell of societal manipulation. In the days that followed, I began to share what had been revealed to me, but the reaction was chilling. My family, alarmed by my transformation, questioned my sanity. Just as Jesus had shown me the plight of the lost, I saw firsthand how fear could shut down hearts. I felt their doubts as barbs, piercing my spirit each time they expressed concern over my mental health, as if I had somehow stepped out of my mind and into madness. I wrestled with the tension this caused within my own home. The words I now spoke felt like flames igniting the very fabric of our relationships. The fire of truth was both empowering and isolating, a dichotomy that threatened to tear apart the bonds I had cherished for so long. That inner struggle echoed across every facet of my life. Every time I turned on the news, a rise in tension gripped my chest. Reports of wars painted vivid images of the suffering that engulfed the world, pulling at my heartstrings. I saw humanity divided by superficial barriers while suffering the same existential weight. It became glaringly obvious. This was not just my fight. It was the collective battle of souls yearning to awaken. Each lie propagated, each manipulation orchestrated, was a drop in an ocean of human suffering. The urgency coursed through me like electric currents, compelling me to act before it was too late. I had to push against the waves of deception, but where do I begin when the shadows of fear loomed large? Amidst my confusion, I felt that familiar fire flare, urging me to step boldly into the unknown while the fate of our world hung in the balance, just beyond the precipice. I recall the fateful moment that altered everything, the day when life morphed into an unfathomable struggle. I was just a blue-collar worker, a man who toiled days and nights at the factory, finding solace in the rhythm of machines and the honest sweat of labor. I had a loving family, cherished my modest home, and supported my community. Yet, Beneath that facade of normalcy, I felt a gnawing uncertainty, a discomfort that shadowed my every thought. It was during one of those long, grueling shifts that the fatal accident occurred. In a blink, everything changed. The machinery I'd relied upon for steady production turned against me, and I was caught in a chaotic whirlwind of steel and agony. In that moment of excruciating pain, I felt my body slipping into darkness, and I was propelled into an experience unlike any other. Suddenly, the pain evaporated, and I found myself surrounded by a brilliance that defied description. It wasn't just light, it was warmth and love entwined. I realized I was in the presence of Jesus. His gaze pierced through me, yet it bore a compassion that wrapped around my deepest fears. Here, in this divine space, I could feel my spirit merging with his, and in that communion, all the deceptions I had been fed throughout my life began to unravel. Jesus lifted the veil that had cloaked my understanding. I saw glimpses of the world's inner workings, political maneuvers masked as benign gestures, a spiritual war plotted in the shadows by an elite group bent on feeding chaotic division into the lives of everyday people. Their hidden agenda was clear. They thrived not on unity, but on our disarray. The revelations continued, as if a torrent of truths poured forth, exposing systems that were crumbling under their own weight. I witnessed the plight of humanity, wars fueled by greed, social injustices ignored, leaders cloaked in righteousness yet entangled in deceit. In those transformative moments, the realization struck me. We are pawns in a grand game, caught in cycles of manipulation crafted by those who thrive on our anguish. The depths of our suffering are exploited to maintain their power, and it became imperative for me to grasp the urgency of this spiritual awakening. The light of truth revealed the very real conflict raging for our souls, a call for each of us to rise, to awaken from slumber. In what felt like an eternity, and yet only a heartbeat, Jesus urged me to recognize the signs that had been blurred by my own ignorance. I sensed the swift advance of technology, its deceptive allure promising connection, yet serving as a mechanism of control, a digital web entrapping us within illusions. I saw the division fueled by social media, the hearts of many hijacked by conflicting narratives that only served to pit us against one another. In this supernatural clarity, I felt a profound partnership with him. He was not only revealing truths, but igniting a fire within me to share these insights, to awaken those still lost in fear. As I stood there, etched into the essence of this divine interaction, I was charged with a sense of responsibility. It was as if the very fabric of time had woven my destiny into a larger narrative, one that required action. I was to become a voice for the voiceless, to cultivate seeds of hope in those bereft of light. In this sacred communion, I sensed the urgency to rally fellow believers and awaken the unsuspecting, to expose the deceptions cloaked in shadows. I felt the gravity of the world's situation pressing down on me, the necessity to break through the silence that had enveloped too many. The spiritual war was escalating. Each day lost was another day surrendered to darkness. But this experience was merely the beginning, a threshold awakening that beckoned me to dig deeper. The journey ahead would demand courage and faith. As I allowed the gravity of these revelations to sink in, I felt compelled to reach out, to share my experience, my newfound mission, to confront the hesitance that binds many to lies. The urgency to connect with those still trapped surged within me. So I began to craft my words, channeling them with intention, knowing that there were still many in shadows, waiting for their moment of awakening, just as I had waited. Little did I know, as I prepared to step forward into the unknown, that the shadows held more than I could imagine. I've lived most of my life as a simple mechanic, surrounded by the sound of roaring engines and the smell of oil. My days were spent tinkering under hoods, chasing after deadlines and cars that broke down more often than not. This routine provided a sense of comfort. I knew my trade. I was respected in my community for my hard work. Yet, deep beneath the surface, a quiet dissatisfaction lingered. Life felt somehow hollow, like I was driving on an empty tank. Then, one fateful day, everything changed. I found myself on the road, heading home after a long shift, when a sudden jolt threw me into a chaotic spin. In a heartbeat, my world transformed into darkness. In that pitch-black void, I felt my spirit rise beyond my physical body. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time, as if I had crossed into a realm where time and space no longer mattered. I was pulled into a brilliant light, a radiance that shimmered with an unearthly love. There, in that resplendent glow, I encountered Jesus. His presence was overwhelming, a blend of warmth and strength that enveloped me completely. In that moment, my regrets, fears, and burdens washed away, replaced by clarity, a truth too profound to grasp fully. It was a revelation, one that illuminated the hidden workings of our world. He spoke to me softly, but his words reverberated with unshakable authority. "The intricacies of your society are woven with deception," he shared, his gaze piercing through the layers of the illusion. As I stood before him, visions erupted within my mind. I saw the puppeteers of power, the elite, cloaked in shadows, manipulating strings that controlled wars and division. I witnessed how technology, once a beacon of progress, was being twisted into an instrument of manipulation, a tool for those who wished to consolidate control over the masses. It was a spiritual war, a struggle unseen to many, yet devastatingly real. Each image unveiled the ticking clock of humanity's fate, and with every heartbeat, I felt urgency intensifying. "Do not be deceived by their glamour," he cautioned, his voice steady amidst the chaos swirling around us. "The peace they offer is but a facade. The world continues to spiral into deeper darkness. Remember, the truth is hidden, and yet it yearns to be revealed." I felt my heart race, a longing to shout this truth to those still in the dark. A wave of responsibility washed over me. I knew that this was not merely an encounter, but a commission. A one calling to awaken others to the reality of the spiritual battles fought every day. Visions of my community flickered before my eyes. I saw my neighbors struggling with disillusionment, families torn apart by deceitful narratives. I realized how absorbed we had all become in our daily distractions, unaware of the unseen forces at work, feeding off our ignorance and division. I felt compelled to warn those around me about the brokenness beneath the surface, about the realities we had been conditioned to ignore. Each life story intertwined with the threads of deception, yet here I stood with the keys to liberation. The weight of this knowledge bore down on my soul, drawing me closer to the light, but more so to my mission. Then, in an instant, as if time had collapsed upon itself, I was yanked back into my body, gasping for air. I awoke in a hospital bed, tethered to machines, but my spirit ignited anew. The revelations I had received clung to me, a sacred flame. I realized that I was reborn, not just in body, but in purpose. The resonance of Jesus' voice still echoed in my mind, compelling me to act. There was much to do, many to reach out to. The winds of change were stirring around me, and the awakening had to begin here. My journey towards sharing the truth was just beginning, and the world was waiting for its awakening. I never imagined my life would take such a jarring turn. I was just a blue-collar worker, a humble mechanic living in a small town. Every day was the same: grease-stained hands, the sound of engines revving, and the comforting hum of my workshop. I was content, rooted in my routine, with little interest in the world beyond my garage doors. Faith was a background presence, a remnant of childhood teachings. I didn't think much about religion or the lingering questions of existence. I had my job, my family, and that was enough. Then everything changed. One rainy afternoon, a truck lost control, veering off the road and crashing into my workshop. Time seemed to stretch as the sound of metal colliding with metal filled the air. I remember the crushing weight of the debris pinning me down, the sharp pain shooting through my body as darkness enveloped me. In that moment of despair, something extraordinary happened. I felt an out-of-body experience soaring above the wreckage, suspended between worlds. It was a near-death experience unlike anything I had ever envisioned. I was drawn toward a blinding light, a warmth that wrapped around me like an embrace. As I approached the light, I suddenly found myself in the presence of Jesus. His gaze pierced through me, unveiling every fear, every regret I had ever harbored. It wasn't judgment I felt, but a profound understanding of my life, the paths I had walked, and the choices I had made. He spoke without words, but I heard the truth resonate in my very core. The reality you perceive is a mere shadow of what exists. The world is in turmoil, caught in a spiritual war where deception reigns supreme. Those words etched themselves into my soul. I was shown visions of the world, wars raging, leaders manipulating the masses, a hidden agenda orchestrated by an elite few determined to shackle humanity in ignorance. Each revelation thrust me deeper into a realization. The divide amongst us is deliberate, a technique to maintain power over the unsuspecting. I could see how technology, once a tool for connection, had morphed into a weapon of isolation. Social media. Divided while the truth became obscured by layers of deception, spinning narratives to serve the interests of the elite. I witnessed people yearning for connection, lost amid their phones, unaware that they were subjects in a game played by unseen hands. I could feel the urgency of the moment, a call to awaken myself and others. The truth, I understood, wasn't just for me, it was a beacon for others imprisoned by lies. As the visions played out, the weight of responsibility settled in my chest. I was being tasked with something larger than myself. Jesus made it clear. My life was not just mine anymore. Sharing these revelations became crucial in the face of the battle for souls. I was overwhelmed with an urgency that felt like fire in my veins. "You must speak out," he implored. "The wars fought are not only political, but deeply spiritual, and you hold the key to awakening many who lay in slumber." I realized my near-death experience was not an end, but an awakening, a passage into a new kind of life filled with conflict, challenges, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Just when I thought I could grasp the gravity of my mission, I was pulled back into my body, gasping for air amidst the rubble. I returned to the chaos, yet the clarity of those divine messages burned bright in my mind. I knew, even as I lay there injured, that I had a purpose that transcended my individual life. I had to confront the reality that the stakes were higher than ever. The illusions crafted by the elite had wrapped themselves around society, igniting divisions and fueling hatred. I found myself yearning not just to heal, but to shout the truths I had uncovered, to enlighten those still trapped in darkness. Each day after the accident transformed into an echo of that divine encounter. The road to recovery felt less about my physical wounds and more about awakening others to their slumber. How could I be silent when the battles of our time raged on, unseen yet profoundly impactful? I began to feel the weight of the world on my shoulders, growing heavier with each passing moment. The urgency I'd felt was still there, pushing me to delve deeper into the truth, to confront the manifestations of the spiritual war surrounding us. I couldn't ignore the message that had found me in the light. It was time for action, time to reveal what was hidden, and time to awaken the souls yearning for truth. What lay ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty, but I knew one thing for sure. The revelations I had received would continue to guide and ignite my life. I was no longer just a mechanic. I had been transformed into a vessel for the message of truth. The spiritual battle before us was relentless, but so was my determination to fight against the forces that sought to keep us in the dark. As I navigated this newfound reality, the urgency for awakening gripped me tightly, and I felt the stakes rising higher, leading me deeper into the next chapter of my life. Now that you've traveled through my journey, let me ask you something profound. Have you ever felt that tug, a pull towards something greater, something just beyond the veil of your current understanding? What if everything we assume about our lives, our faith, and the world is just a shadow of a more significant reality, a rhythm of existence pulsating beneath the surface? Because it is. When I stepped into that brilliant light and faced Jesus, everything I believed was tested and transformed. I came to understand that this world is wrapped in a spiritual warfare far beyond what we perceive with our eyes, where love is the truest weapon against deception and division. There's an elite force striving to blind us, to keep us from awakening to the truth we all deserve to embrace. And in that revelation lay an undeniable urgency for change, a call to everyone willing to listen and awaken to the profound realities of our shared existence. So I turn to you now. Have you ever experienced a moment, a dream, or perhaps a whisper that made you question the very fabric of reality you inhabit? I invite you to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your story matters, and together, we can ignite a movement toward understanding, compassion, and unity. And if this message has stirred something deep within you, don't walk away without subscribing to Truth from Beyond. Hit that notification bell so you won't miss the revelations unfolding in our next journey together. What we'll explore next may just be the beacon of light you've been seeking. I'm Amina, and I thank you for being part of this shared exploration. Remember, as we unravel the truths that bind us, each moment spent in understanding moves us closer to the light we all seek. Until next time.